Today's case takes us just over the Tennessee line to Chattanooga, which sits tucked between the Appalachians and the Cumberland Plateau, where there are stunning mountains that are tall with incredibly steep sides and provide a beautiful backdrop for the green valleys below. It's the birthplace of the moon pie, the home of the first Coca-Cola bottling plant, and the first Crystal Burger was created here. Signal Mountain, also known as Chattanooga's backyard, is home to many beautiful and inviting swimming holes. One of those, the Blue Hole, was a local landmark. The folks around Signal Mountain had swam there for many generations, until the land was sold and someone tried to keep it all to himself. This is the story of the Signal Mountain murders. Richard and Martha Mason bought land in the Walden's Ridge area of Signal Mountain in 1976, close to the Blue Hole, the beloved local swimming hole. Together, they built a log cabin by hand using timber from the property they bought. They have one daughter, Paula, who grew up there and went to school in Signal Mountain, where she met and fell in love with Kenneth Griffith, another local who she married soon after graduation. The two had a shared love of the Blue Hole and often swam there. It was one of Kenneth's favorite places. When Kenneth enlisted in the Air Force, the couple moved to Fort Walton Beach, Florida, where Kenneth was stationed at Eglin Air Force Base. There, he met Earl Smock, who was also from Tennessee and had grown up less than an hour from Chattanooga in Meigs County. The two hit it off and became fast friends. In the summer of 1988, Paula and Kenneth planned to visit home to Signal Mountain. They brought their friend Earl with them. Kenneth had told Earl stories of the Blue Hole, and Earl was eager to finally see it, after hearing about it so much. It was July in the South, hot, humid, and sticky, and a dip in the local swimming hole would be incredibly refreshing. On Saturday, July 9th, 1988, Richard, Kenneth, and Earl got ready to go to the Blue Hole after supper. As they said goodbye to Paula and Martha, the men set off on 3 ATVs. They were never seen alive again. Paula and Martha did not immediately start to worry when the men did not arrive home in a timely manner. Even though they were familiar with the area and had flashlights, it was dark, they had not taken any camping equipment, and they were expected back that evening. Despite being worried, Martha was sure the men would return soon. But when they hadn't returned by Sunday morning, the women called a neighbor who rode out to look for them. He searched the path to the Blue Hole and the surrounding area without finding them, and by late Sunday evening, Paula and Martha called the police to report the men missing. It wasn't long before a large voluntary search party made up of police, friends, and local citizens was combing the woods looking for Richard, Kenneth, and Earl. Everyone was incredibly concerned about the men, and a command center was set up at a nearby elementary school. That same Sunday, about 24 hours after the disappearance, a local made a chilling discovery on Roberts Mill Road. They had found 3 ATVs thrown down a steep embankment. 2 of the ATVs were covered in blood. Police and search parties immediately made the connection that these three-wheelers could belong to the missing men. On Monday, a team of police and local volunteers numbering over 100 started searching a 4-mile radius of the ATVs. At the command center, police received a tip stating gunshots had been heard Saturday night at about 7 to 7:30 p.m. The caller said there were 5 to 8 shots, very quick in succession. The man said he thought the shots were out of place since it was not hunting season in July. He said it sounded like the shots came from the gate on Helicon Road. Police then expanded the search area to include all of Helicon Road. Detective Larry Sneed and other searchers walked approximately 2.2 miles down Helicon Road until they reached the gate. There, they found a disturbance in the ground. They found shotgun pellets in the branches, and the ground appeared to be recently manicured, like someone had carefully attempted to cover something up. They also found a cooler, like the one the men had taken, and a knife that would later be identified as Earl Smock's. On Tuesday, local authorities brought out a cadaver dog who discovered pools of blood on the trail and bloody drag marks. After finding this, the family and law enforcement knew that something had taken place here. 2 days later, the bodies of all 3 men were found stacked on top of each other 12 miles away on Suck Creek Mountain in Marion County, Tennessee. 2 of the bodies had on flight suits, so it was quickly confirmed who the men were. All 3 had been shot. Earl was shot 2 times. A local journalist stated that the bodies were meant to be found, the ATVs were meant to be found, but the crime scene was not meant to be found. Why else would so much effort be put into hiding the blood, gore, and tissue left behind? After finding the 3 men, detectives chased down a number of different leads trying to find the killer without success. They next attempted to interview all residents of Signal Mountain and gather as much info as possible. They asked homeowners to come to the search area. It was during this time that Frank Castile first came to their attention. He was the newest member of the Signal Mountain community. And with his permission, police searched his Jeep, confiscated a logbook Castile had been keeping, and obtained a shotgun from him as well. Castile had recently, aggressively, been restricting access to the Blue Hole, the exact swimming hole Richard, Kenneth, and Earl were headed to when they went missing. But Frank Castile had an alibi. According to him, he and his wife Susie had spent the day at the Blue Hole, swimming, picnicking, and camping out for their anniversary. Frank Castile denied he had seen the 3 men. In the weeks leading up to the disappearances, Frank Castile had been keeping a logbook of all people he thought had violated his property lines. He would confront each person, log their name, the make of their vehicles, and their purpose for being at the Blue Hole. This was the logbook turned over to police. Just days before the 3 men went missing, the most recent entries in the logbook were Terry Mills and Jeff Mann. Both men stated that Castile carried a shotgun and had screamed at them to leave. They said he was incredibly angry, and one of the men stated he had never been so scared of a man before. Both of them left immediately, never to return. Of note, when Castile was purchasing the property, he was warned that the public used the Blue Hole and Helicon Road as communal access, and if he would have an issue with people going there, he was advised against purchasing the property. Castile had owned his land around the Blue Hole for less than 6 months when this happened. He had never owned the Blue Hole itself. The land he did own, however, crossed Helicon Road, and many said he regularly confronted people at the gate. Some tips the police investigated included the neighbor on Signal Mountain saying he had heard gunshots the night before near the gate. Another neighbor said they had seen Castile's Jeep with ATVs in the back of it on the night of the murders. But she never said anything to police because she said she received threatening calls advising her not to say anything, and eventually she moved to Florida to get away from the threats. A third local stated they had seen a woman who was blocking traffic near where the ATVs were found. It was said she wouldn't allow anyone to pass by on the road, and she had acted frustrated. Police never identified this woman. 2 other witnesses hesitated to come forward. They were parked on a remote Jeep trail that night, having an affair. When they did tell police what they saw, they said they saw 2 men in a silver or blue truck loaded up with ATVs and headed towards where the bodies were found. Another citizen had seen a woman washing what appeared to be blood out of the back of a Jeep on the Sunday morning after the men went missing. He asked if it was blood, and she replied it was, that she had just taken a hog to the slaughterhouse. He thought it weird enough to note the license plate number because slaughterhouses are usually closed on Sundays. He later saw the same Jeep in town, matched the plates, and stated the Jeep was driven by Frank Castile. Since no forward movement was made finding the killer, Unsolved Mysteries came to town and did a piece on the Signal Mountain murders. They recreated all the crime scenes, and it aired in January of 1990. But as time passed, no one came forward, and police had no evidence to charge anyone. They did say the killer was familiar with the area and that everything pointed to one man, but they wouldn't identify who they suspected. The case ultimately went cold until 1996. It was then that Detective Larry Sneed received a call at home. A female caller said, "If you want to solve the Signal Mountain murders, you need to get Marie Hill. She knows all about it." It turns out Marie Hill was Frank Castile's mistress. They had begun an affair earlier that year after attending their 30th high school reunion. Marie said it wasn't long into the relationship before she received anonymous phone calls stating Frank was a killer and letters with news clippings in the mail after starting to date him. All of them said, "Frank killed those men on the mountain, just thought you should know who you're dating." Letters were sent to Marie's neighbors as well to warn them that she was dating a murderer. Marie did not know who was sending these letters, but the police absolutely suspected Castile's wife Susie was the author. Once police made contact with Marie, they asked her to work undercover for them. She agreed and was happy to help. The third letter Marie received described a murder. It said, "We were up there camping, and these men came up on 3-wheelers, and Frank shot them because they were disturbing him, and then he sent me home." That letter was signed by Boozy. Marie allowed her phone to be tapped, and her home bugged. She continued to see Castile. Police were hoping he would make incriminating statements about the murders. After weeks of round-the-clock surveillance, police got lucky when Susie Castile showed up to Marie's house late at night to confront Frank Castile. Their entire 5-hour conversation was recorded. It had Susie stating things like, "What I went through 8 years ago," and "After the things I've done for you." Police now think Susie helped hide the bodies and clean up the murder scene. Police were able to test the saliva on a stamp used to send Marie letters, and it was Susie Castile's. They were unsuccessful, though, at getting a confession from Castile on tape and had no evidence to charge Susie. For years, police had stated they knew who their killer was, they just didn't have the evidence. On April 15, 1997, Detective Larry Sneed arrested Frank Castile for the murders of Richard Mason, Kenneth Griffith, and Earl Smock. It is unclear what evidence was found that prompted the arrest. Even though he was a suspected murderer, Castile had supporters. In some places, land was all you had, so you protected it at all costs. Some people say they didn't blame Castile because it was his property. Others were terrified they had a murderer living in their backyard. Castile spent over a year in jail leading up to the trial that began on Monday, May 11, 1998. There was a media frenzy, and of course lots of stories about Frank Castile were being told. Witnesses recalled frightening encounters with Castile as the Hamilton County District Attorney laid out their case. The DA said Kenneth Griffith was shot first, Richard Mason was shot second, and Earl Smock was shot 2 times. It appears he attempted to run away, but the shooter followed him for over 40 yards for the kill shot. Susie Castile testified and said she was just trying to paint Frank in a bad light in the letters she wrote and calls she made. She denied any of the information was true. She said she made it up so Marie would stop having an affair with her husband. Frank Castile claimed all 15 witnesses against him were lying. The trial ended Friday, May 20th, 1998. After 10 years investigating, 2 weeks of testimony, and 40 minutes of jury deliberation, Frank Castile was found guilty of 3 counts of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. Susie Castile never admitted to any wrongdoing for herself or her husband. She actually had an outburst in court as his life sentence was read, wailing, "He didn't do it, he didn't do it," as Frank was taken away. A 2001 Tennessee appeals court overturns the conviction, citing improper admission of evidence. So after a few years in prison, Castile was granted a mistrial, with the judge stating the recordings of Castile, Susie, and Marie should not have been allowed in court. The retrial started in 2003, and he was quickly found guilty again on all counts. He was re-sentenced to life in prison, where he died in May of 2019 at 71 years old. And although the land around the Blue Hole is privately owned, you can access the clear blue waters once more. If you've made it this far, thank you. And if you've enjoyed our content, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. We will be uploading once a month and will be focusing on solved true crime cases. We hope you join us for our next video, and also if you have any case suggestions, please leave them in the comments below. We look forward to hearing from you. Bye!